Well, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Talking Pop Culture with Jake D. And I am going live tonight to talk to you about the series premiere of CBS's All Access, The Stand. So it has been a number of years since we've seen The Stand on screen. I remember when I was younger, there was a miniseries, I think it was on NBC, and it was, I believe it was Rob Lowe who starred in that version of The Stand so many years ago. I want to say it was 94. I could be off on my timing. But this is something, it was one of my favorite books, probably in, I think it was high school, where I did finally read this one. And it was always one of my favorite Stephen King books. One of the things that I really liked about it was, it was a pure battle of good and evil. And it was all about the humanity of these two groups of people, one that ended up following Randall Flagg, and the other, of course, that ended up following Mother Abigail. So when I heard that CBS was launching a new version of The Stand, I was definitely excited by that opportunity. Some of the casting announcements were pretty exciting. I mean, we've got Skarsgård playing Randall Flagg. While I'm not a big fan of her as a person, Whoopi Goldberg is a good actor, and a decent choice to play Mother Abigail. So the setup for it was something that got me excited. Again, big fan of the books. I did, kind of like the last miniseries that was done to try to portray this on screen. And it was, The Stand is a big project to take on. So very curious to see what CBS did about this. And just another red shirt, good evening. I don't think I verbally said hello, although I did pop your comment onto the screen there. So episode 1 premiered today. I watched it this morning, and overall, I'm not displeased with what we saw in the first episode. I'm going to go ahead and clock it in at a 7 out of 10. I'll get my rating out of the way kind of early on this one and talk to you about what I liked, maybe what I didn't like, how they're approaching the presentation of this epic novel. It's like a 1,300-page novel. So the amount of material that you've got to deal with is massive. So how they adapt that is really, really important. So our first episode kicked off. Basically, we're only following 3 major characters in the first episode: Stu Redman out of Texas, and Franny Goldsmith and Harold Lauder out of Maine. Goldsmith and Lauder, they're from a little town called Ogunquit, and Stu Redman is from this little town called Arnett, Texas. And those are the only major characters that got any amount of significant screen time in the first episode today. The way that they've structured it, and I assume the next probably 3, perhaps even 4 episodes are going to do a similar thing, is they picked the 2 characters to focus on, and they showed them in basically 2 different time periods. As a fan of the book, it wasn't hard for me to follow because I know what's happening. I'm very familiar with the story, how everything's going to progress as we're going through this. But I do think that it's possible that somebody who's not a fan of the novel and familiar with the story may potentially get a little bit lost in what they're watching. Because of the way they jump around in time, and it's a nonlinear presentation of events, starting with, about maybe 10% into the book is sort of where they start with Stu and Franny. And then they jump almost to the middle for some of the scenes as well. Hail, Eric K. How are you, sir? Good to have you here this evening, my friend. So the dual timeline presentation, again, it was fine for me because I'm very familiar with the story. And I'm not sure if that's going to work for somebody who's not as familiar with the story of The Stand, whether you've seen some of the old miniseries presentations or whether you were a fan of the novel and you read through it, many, many years ago when it came out. One of my memories of The Stand was they used to advertise the complete and uncut edition of the book. It was like this big re-release that they were talking about on TV all the time when I was a kid, which, hey, advertising does work sometimes. It got me to pick up the book, so just another red shirt, Eric K. I don't know if you guys have seen the first episode or not. I'm curious what your thoughts were on the nonlinear presentation of, the stories of Stu, Franny, and Harold. And again, being very familiar with the book, I didn't miss what was going on, and I was able to follow it really well. We, see kind of the initial parts of the outbreak of Captain Trips, the super flu, and, of course, how Stu and Franny's stories relate to that with all their, Franny, all the family in the town is dying around her, and it's just left with her and Harold alive. And then Stu, of course, gets taken in by the army into a facility to try to figure out just why first it was a quarantine operation. And then, of course, they discover that Stu is immune. The doctor that was working with Stu was really good. I didn't catch the actor who was playing him, although he bore a resemblance somewhat to almost like a thinner Mark Ruffalo. Looked very similar, but a little older, a little grayer, a little thinner around the face. I didn't catch who the actor was, but I liked him as the doctor that was studying Stu and trying to, get to the bottom of why everybody else dies except for Stu. They have some scenes interspersed throughout, including the opening scene where they're actually in Boulder, which again, fans of the book, people who know the story, realize that, that's like 30-40% into the book before they all kind of gather in Boulder and Vegas. And we get some scenes of Stu, Franny, and Harold in Boulder at the very start. They're actually doing the body brigade, where the Boulder Free Zone is cleaning out the bodies from all the homes in Boulder, because they need to clean it up because everybody died. So and that's one of the opening scenes, and it was unexpected for me. It only took me a minute to catch on to what they were doing, and it worked for me. But I'm really familiar with the story, so it was easy for me to follow. And it was good. The presentation of how the people in Boulder were beginning to accept Harold as who he was and as a friend. They even dropped the Hawk nickname that he earned himself while he was there a couple of times during the episode. And so that was interesting. Stu's story going through the studying by the doctors in the army facility, and then they move him to the Stovington facility in Vermont because there was a breach, and the original facility that they had him kept in failed, of course, because Captain Trips is, we really should have realized when we all read The Stand that lockdowns don't work. That's all I'm going to say about that, because all the lockdowns didn't work in The Stand. The virus got through regardless. And they move him over to Stovington, and we got a nice small character role from J.D. Simmons, or J.K. Simmons, who played Starkey, the general in charge of the Vermont facility. And everything's going to shit because that's what happens in The Stand. And Stu gets kind of a last visit from the doctor who'd been caring for him and trying to work with him to figure out why he's immune. And he's, of course, sick, one of the last people to succumb in the facility. And the special forces guy that was basically had orders to kill him if everything went to shit. Stu managed to take him out because he was about to die anyway. And the General Starkey calls him up, and it's J.K. Simmons. And there was a really cool scene, and they did the whole quoting of Yeats, and he had the everything falls apart poem that he was quoting, and you could see the torture in Starkey's eyes, played by Simmons, which was really good. And there was a really great scene. This was different than the book. This was something that they did in the TV adaptation, but I liked it, and it worked really well because Starkey's madness and suicide in the book, it was something that happened to him alone. So by bringing the two of them together in the show, I think for a television presentation of what was going down, it worked really, really well. And, so Simmons helps him finally get out of the facility towards the end of the episode. Franny and Harold, their portion of the story is everybody in town dying, her having to bury their family, and Harold sort of coming up with a plan for what they should do, which is to head to the CDC down in Georgia. So Just Another Red Shirt says that, having read the book, the number of characters to be introduced and followed through the first part of the story is complicated enough without jumping around in time within the story. And that is a fair observation, Just Another Red Shirt. I would, I know the book really well, and I followed it fine. My concern is for a more casual viewer that's not as familiar with the story as we are, that your comments on the money, it could be something that a more casual viewer, somebody who's not already fully understanding what's going on, they could perhaps easily get lost. And yes, there are a huge number of characters to introduce in this first part of the book, and we've only really seen the first three. We did get a couple of brief appearances by Skarsgård as Randall Flagg. I liked him. It was good. And we did get one brief dream sequence with Whoopi Goldberg as Mother Abigail. And my only complaint about Goldberg as Mother Abigail, and this might sound nitpicky, but I really don't think it is, she is not fucking old enough. They did not age her enough. In the book, Mother Abigail's like 108 years old, if I remember correctly. She's well over 100. I know that for sure. She's either 106, 108 years old, and she still can, kill her own chickens. So Whoopi was, she looked fine. Don't misunderstand. It's just the Mother Abigail that I picture and that King truly described was much, much older than Whoopi is. And I really think they should have done more to make her appear more elderly and haggard, because it's important to me. Abigail is an important character, and her extreme age is one of her defining features, as well as her extreme faith, of course, which I'm sure Whoopi's fully capable of portraying. It just, again, it probably sounds like a nitpick, but her not being of extreme advanced age, I don't know how I feel about that. Maybe it's because of my dedication to the books, but it does worry me a little bit. I honestly, it'll probably play out okay in the show, but it bugged me a little. So Eric K saying he'd love to see a series based on Needful Things, going from town to town each season, done right, could be amazing. Needful Things is one I have never picked up. So I'm just gonna have to trust your judgment on that one, Eric. And hey, you know what? After seeing you gamble in Vegas and come away a winner, I'm gonna have to say your judgment must be pretty decent. But the actor played as Harold. I think I understand why they made this particular creative choice, because there's some things in a show that they can't be exactly like they were in the book. And so the kid who's playing Harold Lauder is thin to begin with. In the books, Lauder was severely overweight, horrible, horrible skin, greasy hair, this kind of thing. And then, yeah, after seeing, yes, clearly your judgment is amazing. I'm not going to argue with that, Eric. so, but yeah, so Lauder, instead of being, a fat slob, neckbeard type character, they've gone with kind of the skinny, frail nerd approach, which makes sense because in the book, Harold's physique changes rather drastically. He loses a lot of weight, and over the course of filming a miniseries, that's going to be something that'd be really hard to capture. So it's probably a good choice creatively to go with just kind of a skinny nerd to begin with, and maybe let him bulk up a little bit once he gets to Boulder. So, okay, makes sense to me. A little disappointing because like his fatness and his grossness was actually pretty important, but that I totally understand that sacrifice for TV. The actress who played Franny, she was unremarkable to me. The performance was okay. It wasn't bad by any stretch, but it also didn't stand out. And there were a couple of scenes when they skipped to the Boulder Free Zone with Stu and Franny together, and maybe it was because it was a bit of a brief scene and there was some awkwardness with Harold being there, but the chemistry was missing a little bit between the two actors there. Although the guy playing Redman, I like him a lot. He's a little younger than they make him out to be in the book, but that's the kind of casting choice that I think it's not horribly important for the overall story. He's certainly older than Franny and Harold, but the Stu Redman that I picture from the books, is more of a guy like in his 40s or so. And this guy was probably late 20s, the actor. Again, these aren't major problems. It's just kind of differences that I picked out between my remembrance of this, this epic novel that King wrote versus what we're seeing on screen. I was satisfied with the first episode, and I didn't mind it. I thought the liberties that they took made sense, at least in terms of like the casting choices, some of the scenes that they changed around, all fine for me in an adaptation of something this big. Not a big deal. The scoring for the show in this first episode, very, very good. Nothing stands out certainly as distracting or problematic. I do think it enhanced the mood well, which is what a proper score should do. So yeah, again, overall 7 out of 10. I did enjoy the episode. It did keep me engaged. There was nothing about it that like jerked me out of the story. One of the scenes where we got to see Randall Flagg, I thought was really cool. Towards the end of the episode, they showed us Campion escaping from the Army bioweapons lab. And they showed, how the door got stuck open after it was supposed to lock down. And he, of course, panics and runs after seeing somebody in the contained area dying from the super flu that got him. And this is the guy who releases the contagion on the world that kills 99% of people in the entire planet. And they did a neat little thing where they had Flagg actually stop the door from closing. Because Flagg is this sort of supernatural being. Campion didn't see him, but he stuck his boot out to stop that door from closing to make sure that the super flu gets out. And I liked that. That again was a bit of a deviation from the novel itself. In the novel, it was just a mechanical malfunction. But this was an adjustment that it was good because I think it helps present to the watcher, the viewer, particularly if they're not super familiar with the story, It gives some kind of mystery and intrigue to the character of Randall Flagg, and definitely establishes him as evil as fuck, which is of course what Randall Flagg should be. Skarsgård looks great in the role. They even had the little button on his jacket, the little smiley face yellow button that's described so often in the novel. So they did a really good job there, and I'm looking forward to see more of Skarsgård as the story continues to develop and, of course, become more supernatural, and seeing how that changes over the course of the series. But yeah, so that's kind of a wrap. That's what we get out of the first episode. I'm not sure which characters they're going to pick up next week in the second episode of the series. If I had to make a guess, we're probably going to see Eddie and Rita. They are two of the characters that show up a fair bit in the marketing for the show. So those would be a good couple to pick up. And I believe in a teaser, it looks like Eddie and Rita are going to be two of the characters we see. I'm really looking forward to seeing the Trash Can Man and how he's portrayed, because he's one of my favorite characters out of this story. And seeing how they present him and his story, and especially his journey across the country, just blowing shit up everywhere, where he comes radically burned and everything. That's going to be, I really hope they do that justice, because it's a wacky, weird story, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with that on screen. All right, well, I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight. If you liked the video, please don't forget to like it, share it with your friends on social media, and please, if you're coming across me for the first time, consider subscribing to the channel. I cover general pop culture news. I'll be covering every episode of The Stand as it airs, covering every new episode of The Expanse, and tomorrow morning I do have a stream scheduled to cover the season finale of The Mandalorian. And of course, I have my weekly Sunday evening shows, Howling About Entertainment, right here on the channel with a bunch of good folks who get together and talk about stuff like this. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next stream.